Hi, hello, my name is Samira and welcome back to my channel. So for today's video, I decided that I was going to do a TBR video for the Asian Readathon this year. If you're unfamiliar with the Asian Readathon, this is an annual readathon hosted by Read with Cindy, and its primary focus is to bring awareness to books by Asian authors and books featuring Asian main characters. I tried to do this readathon last year, but one, I fail at readathons, and two, I fail to stick to a certain TBR. So without further ado, here's my TBR for this year's Asian Readathon. So for this readathon, there's 5 different prompts that you have to follow. You can use one book for multiple prompts as long as the different books that you do choose to read, they're by different Asian authors, so they can't all be from one specific country. It has to have like some sort of diversity within that, because again, we're trying to bring awareness and like also just show appreciation for Asian authors from all over the world. So for this year, I chose 5 different books of 5 different Asian authors of different ethnicities, and like I mentioned before, a lot of these, they can be interchangeable with a different prompt, so like regardless of what I choose for a specific prompt, they can all sort of like tie in with one another. So the first prompt is to read any book written by an Asian author. So for this prompt, I chose Counting Down With You by Tashi Bhuyan. Tashi is Bangladeshi and it also follows a Bangladeshi main character. And this has the fake dating trope, bad boy trope, and also the fact that not only throwing in fake dating, but also the dynamic of having immigrant parents and not only having a fake relationship, but also like them finding out about said relationship regardless if it's real or not. I was like, yes, this very much speaks to me and personal experiences. So I've heard so many good things, and I've seen like obscure quotes from the book. One thing that I did see on Twitter that actually convinced me to read this book was the fact that a guy, in order to get her to agree to fake date him, he agrees to buy her 12 books a week. If that's not legend energy, then I don't know what is. This just sounds like so much fun, and it's also her debut novel, so I'm so excited. I need to read this ASAP right when it comes out. So the next prompt is to read a book featuring an Asian protagonist, and for this I chose These Violent Delights by Chloe Gong. I have been waiting to read this book since it came out. Like, I literally bought it right when it came out, and I just somehow never got around to reading it, unfortunately. So I'm making it a point to read it this month, and everyone's been raving about it. I've been wanting to read it since it came out, and I think the sequel comes out later on this year if I'm not mistaken. So I feel like this would be minimal cliffhanger book hangover situation if I read it now. If you don't know what this is about, this is a Romeo and Juliet retelling set in 1920 Shanghai, and it follows Juliet Kai, who is a flapper in the 1920s. However, she's also the heiress of the Scarlet Gang, which is a league of criminals in Shanghai, and it just so happens that her ex-lover is also the heir of the rival gang, the White Flowers. So not only are they enemies, but also it's very much the lovers to enemies to lovers situation. The flavor, hello, but they have to put their differences aside, suck it up, and work together because there's this monster that's terrorizing the Huangpu River. So I'm all about it. I need to read it ASAP, and yeah. So the third prompt is to read any book written by an Asian author in your favorite genre. It's a toss-up between romance and fantasy for me. It honestly depends on my mood because I'm very much a mood reader, but for the sake of this challenge, I'm gonna go with a fantasy. And for that, I'm choosing The Wolf of Orinoto by K.S. Veloso. This is a Filipino fantasy written by a Filipino author. If you don't know me, I am half Filipino and half Iranian, so for Asian Readathon, I wanted to make a point to have 2 books that feature authors or main characters that highlight my ethnic background, so I chose The Wolf of Orinoto for this category. I don't really know much about the series other than I've seen it all over my Twitter feed yet again, And somehow I've been meaning to read this since it came out as well. This is like a trend, I feel like. I believe it's a trilogy. I know the third one comes out May 4th. So yeah, I'm gonna try my hand at this first book and see how I feel about it. But like I said, I don't know much about this series. I kind of just like said, okay, I've heard a lot of rave reviews about it, and I kind of want to keep it that way. I tend to, especially with fantasies, I like to go in with no expectations, especially like sometimes it's better like to go into a book and not know what it's about, like just know the vibes if the vibes are good. And so that's very much the situation here. I kind of want to keep it that way of me not knowing exactly what the book is about. So I'm really looking forward to reading this book, and I hope it lives up to my expectations, which I'm trying to keep my expectations on the low side, which it's better if it exceeds my expectations. So let's hope that's the situation with this. So for the fourth prompt in the Asian Readathon, it's to read a nonfiction book written by an Asian author, and for that I chose Crying in Hmart by Michelle Zellner. I personally don't read a lot of nonfiction just because I use reading as escapism, so that's just my personal reading tastes, but I have seen this floating around because I believe it just came out as well, and I read the synopsis and it just seemed like something so heart-wrenching yet heartwarming. So this is a memoir that Michelle writes about how she came to terms with her identity, being a Korean American, growing up being the only Asian kid in her school, dealing with the high expectations that her mother had for her, and just grappling with who she was and how she fit into America, being who she is as an Asian American woman. And I just think it would be really interesting, especially like in the times that we're in now, to learn more about the experience. Or there's just something that just seems so raw and emotional and just genuine about it, like just from reading the synopsis. And I have a feeling that this is going to make me cry, which it is called Crying in Hmart for a reason. And I feel like it's going to be something that hits really close to home. I mean, obviously, I'm not Korean American, but as an Asian American, I feel like I could see myself in some of it, or at least like relate to certain aspects. And so, yeah, I'm really looking forward to reading this book. Like I said, it's kind of out of my comfort zone, but I'm willing to give it a try. And for the last prompt of Asian Readathon is to read any book written by an Asian author that's not US-centric. So this not only is featuring Asian authors, but also sort of like getting out of the pigeonhole of stories set in America. So for this, I chose The Stationery Shop by Marjan Kamoli. So The Stationery Shop follows Roya, who is a teenager living in 1953 Tehran during a whole political upheaval, and finds her literary oasis in Mr. Fakhri's stationery shop. It's just full of pens, notebooks, books, everything that's just very comforting to her. And Mr. Fakhri, other than being a stationery shop owner, he also loves to play a matchmaker. So he ends up trying to set up Roya with his other favorite customer, Rahman. So it just follows them having this sort of like budding romance. And we fast forward on the eve of their marriage, and somehow, so on the eve of their marriage, they agree to meet up at this fountain the night before, but on their way to their rendezvous point, an explosion occurs and they're separated. Bahman never shows up. Roya tries to contact him, and it's been several weeks, several months. She still hasn't heard anything from him. So to escape from Tehran, she moves to California, where she never hears anything ever again from Bahman. 60 years later, by stroke of luck, fate brings Bahman straight to Roya, where they sort of rekindle what they once had, and they also like get answers to all the questions about where were you, like how were you separated from me, like where have you been all this time. So this just seems very much a heartwarming, again, why is this a trend for this year, very heartwarming yet heart-wrenching story. And I tend to not like angsty books, but this just sounds beautiful, and I'm really looking forward to reading about this book because I've heard a lot of good things about it, and I've honestly also been wanting to read this, so I'm excited to dive in and I hope I love it. So those are the 5 books I'm planning to read in May for this year's Asian Readathon. If you're participating, please let me know and let me know what you're gonna read for this month. And I'm hoping to either do a vlog of this or probably just do a wrap up at the end of May of all the books that I hopefully read. Hopefully I read all of these. But yeah, so that's it from me, and until next time, bye!